Hello, everyone. I'm glad you joined me for this particular message. I want to talk to you about the rock from which you were hewn. I'm continuing a series I'm doing on the ending of Isaiah, and the ending is it's seen through the book of Isaiah. But I'm stopping today on Isaiah chapter 51 and looking at information in verses 1 and 2 of Isaiah, where Isaiah says, or God says through Isaiah, look to the rock from which you were hewn. I was struck as I looked at minerals and rocks and stones. If you pick up a stone and you know what you're doing as a geologist, you can tell what rock that stone came from. There are several different types of rocks. There's igneous, which is formed from magma or from molten rock, and then there is a sedimentary rock, which is formed with layers of generally layers that are deposited in water. Sandstone is a type of sedimentary rock. Limestone is a type of sedimentary rock as well. It is deposited in layers as it's washed out of water, and so that's what we call sedimentary rock. And then there is what is known as metamorphic rock. And metamorphic rock is formed out of the other two under environmental pressure or under heat or under decomposition as a result of environmental factors. And so those types of rocks are formed as a result of the impact of life and nature upon the first two types of rock. And that's intriguing to me in its own right. We are told to look to the rock from which we were hewn. If you take a stone, it will have the same character, the same characteristics of the rock from which it came. A rock which comes from granite or a stone that comes from granite will have the same character as the natural granite it came from. And each types of granite are different, so they can actually tell where a piece of stone came from if they can determine the original source of that by looking at it chemically and going down and understanding the chemical makeup of it. They can actually tell where it came from. They can tell that about most rocks, actually. It's rather an interesting field. So we understand that the character or the characteristic of that rock follows down into the stone that comes off of it. We often use the term a chip off the old block, and that's kind of where this concept comes from. It's the idea of coming off of that and having the same character, the same makeup, the same build, as it were. In our lives, we are called to be stones taken from the rock. We are taken from the rock who is Jesus Christ. It's his character that works its way in and through us. And if people meet us, even though we might be shaped into something different, or we might have experienced some changes or bumped around a little bit in the streams of life, people will still know that we come from Christ. That character will be in us. It will be part of who we are, what we are. And so we look at the rock from which we are hewn for our character and our direction in life. Part of that means that we pursue righteousness, as Isaiah chapter 51 indicates. We pursue righteousness. We desire what God desires. We want what he wants. If we are to face difficulties in our lives, and Isaiah chapter 51 is actually a continuation of the thought in Isaiah chapter 50. That thought is directly referencing the Messiah and the work of the Messiah in the world. In fact, if you go back into chapter 50, you'll read about them plucking his beard, and it's talking about that moment of trouble and difficulty when Christ was on trial and when he was facing the ultimate test, as it were, of his faith, of his resolve to go forward with God's will. And we see that in the Garden of Gethsemane, the whole concept of being willing to follow what God wanted, what the Father wanted. So when we look at that, we are looking at this concept of the character of Christ. He is facing tribulation and difficulty, and he tells us as his children, as God tells us as his children, that as we face tribulation, we too must have that same character. We must have that same type of behavior, that desire for righteousness, that desire to fulfill God's purpose. It needs to get inside of us and work its way out from there. Isaiah also tells them to look to Abraham and Sarah, who were the founders of the Jewish people. And he is speaking to them at a time when the northern kingdom, has been destroyed. The Israelites of the northern kingdom, Samaria, had been destroyed and taken into captivity. And now only Judah, the tribes of Judah and Simeon and part of Benjamin, are all that is left in the promised land of the people of God, the Israelites. And he says, look to Abraham and Sarah. Abraham, who was willing to follow God to a part of the world that seemed impossible, and willing to believe God in spite of the most hopeless of circumstances. And that belief in God was credited to him, as Paul tells us, as righteousness. And so it was God's righteousness in him. It was what transformed Abraham into being the man that God needed him to be. It was also that faith that drew along Sarah, and she became the mother of the Jewish people. In that sense, we need our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ who have gone ahead of us. They are, in a sense, as Paul would say of himself in relationship to Timothy, I am a spiritual father to Timothy. I am a person who is directed and guided and become central to his experience of faith. So we have people in our background as Christians who are central to our faith, and they have laid down a course, as it were, of stones that we are building upon in our lives. And it's critical for us as Christians to understand that aspect of our faith. We are part of a heritage of faith that goes back a long way. It is amazing what this faith can do. It is amazing how it has transformed the world. And no matter what tribulations Christians have faced throughout the years, the character of Christ within them has allowed them to face those tribulations, those problems, and those difficulties, and come out victorious. And they are what we build our faith upon. And if Christ tarries, we will be able to go forward into the future, and Christianity will grow and develop. But if we are in the end times, then that faith will carry us through, and the character of Christ within us will help us to face the tribulations at the end. And those are the things that are foundational for us as Christians. We can have confidence in Christ we can have confidence in his power and his ability, for we remember the rock from which we are hewn. Thank you for listening. God bless you. I hope I'll see you in church today. God bless.